everyone.
You ready down there, Billy?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let's get started. We'll call the meeting to order. First order of business, we do have Trustee White, John White, on the telephone. So can you call the roll?
Albritton,
Present.
Balin,
Present.
Giddings,
Here.
Moore,
Here.
Swazer,
Here, you forgot Mariana.
Mariani,
Here.
Walker,
Excuse.
D. Waterman, P. Waterman,
I was sworn in yesterday, so I'm legal.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we'll just follow. Is that everyone?
No.
P. Waterman,
Yeah. John White, John, what?
That should be everyone.
Did you call John White?
Knight, White.
John White, he's here.
He said he was here.
Present.
Present. Okay, we have a quorum, so we're going to get started. Let me begin by welcoming the new, old Jim Mariani. And the reason that I would say he's new and old because he's been here before.
Many years.
Yeah, of course, Jim comes with a wealth of knowledge of the city and of the system. And so it should take him maybe a couple of hours in order to hit the ground running. We're glad to have you as a part of us, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
You know, I'd like to say, as we got a lot of business to take care of, and I would just hope that as we delve into this business, that we never lose sight of who we are here for. We're not here for ourselves. There are a number of retirees that are out here that depend on what we do. And sometimes I think those of us that are in leadership positions take this stuff personal. And just have to remember this is, we're only here because someone else put us here to represent people of this system. As long as we keep the members of this system at the forefront of our decisions, then we should be just fine. And I just ask too that we continue to respect one another and be respectful in how we present ourselves to one another, because I was always told that no matter what you do or where you go, there's somebody looking at you. And so they're always looking at us too. We want to make sure that this general retirement system gives off the best image that we possibly can. And with that, we're going to go ahead and ask if is there anyone from the public that would like to discuss? Like to say something.
I just congratulate Jim. I've known him. He's a good person. So I'm pleased.
Thank you.
Anyone else would like to say something from the public? How you doing, John? Hearing none, are there any agenda changes?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay. The first agenda change is to amend new business. There is an agenda item under new business to certify the election results. That was not in the electronic version, but it is in a hard copy before you. We will need to amend new business to add a resolution regarding the Sizer investment. We will need to amend the legal report. We do not have the closed session minutes for July. They were not complete. And we will also need to reenact, or amend the agenda to reenact the closed session resolution from July because it was not moved nor supported. And we'll do that when we get to legal.
Okay, if we could, so that we'll make sure that everything is legal, why don't we begin the first item by certifying the election then, and then that will be the last week that we'll need to to close in order for trustee Mariani to,
So that's a new business, item A.
yeah. Is there any objections to moving that to the first item on the agenda? Okay. Motion's in order.
That's all I want.
Moved
I'll support.
and supported. Any comments, questions, or concerns? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, so ordered. We heard you, John.
All right.
Okay, now, let's approve, or if there's no objection, we'll just declare it done, that the Sizer, the closed minutes, session, and what was the last one? Was-
And a reenactment of the motion to go into closed session. So we'll need to amend the agenda for those three
Okay,
items.
where did you wanna,
So we'll
do that
amend
at?
new business for the Sizer investment, and we'll amend the legal report for the closed session minutes, as well as the closed session motion.
okay, if there's no objection, I don't think we have to take an official vote on that, we can just declare that will be, or will we need a motion on that?
Do we need a motion?
To make the agenda changes?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, we need a motion?
Sure.
Okay, motion's in order to make these, agenda changes,
I'll make the motion to
okay?
amend the
Been
agenda.
moved
Support.
and supported. Is there any questions, comments, or concerns as it relates to that? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. So ordered. Okay, let's then go to consent agenda.
Does
Any
anyone-
questions, comments, or concerns as it relates to our consent agenda? Okay, motion
I move.
and move,
Support.
support. Questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Who supported?
Auburn.
Oh, three.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Then now we'll go to the consultant.
You're on. I am on. It looks like my portion is pretty light, but I'm gonna ask if you all just take one, pass it down, please. And this is a preliminary snapshot as of the end of July. There should be enough of it, I think.
Wasn't bad.
Extra.
What I'll say for the view that we see today, July was a very good month for the portfolio. So it's kind of a high watermark. We've come down since this value, unfortunately. Not unexpected, of course, but for the month at least, the fund gained 0.6%, bringing the year-to-date return to 13.8%, which is a very strong return for the year. Longer term numbers, 3 years, 5 years, and 10 years were 8.7, 7.1, and 10% respectively. We do also include an inception number there since 95 of 8.2%. God bless you. So what you see is that over the long term, the portfolio has performed very well. What I'll say is that July was a continuation where it looked like the stock market was going to go up. And there was some alleviation of what trade might happen. Since this, of course, there's been a lot more volatility relative to that. Right now, the dominating forces for the stock market are, number one, what's happening with trade, because you are in a trade battle between the number one and number two economic powers in the world. Number three would be the Eurozone taken as a whole, and as you know, Europe isn't particularly doing very well either. You have a situation where the Italian government is reforming. You may have heard recently that Brexit and the champion of Brexit is trying to suspend Parliament for the last several weeks so that he can potentially get Brexit through there. Germany has negative rates and potentially could be going into a recession. So you have a lot of challenges outside the US. That's the first issue, trade. Another thing that continuously comes up is the shape of the yield curve. And as a reminder, the shape of the yield curve just refers to bonds of US securities across different durations. A normal shaped yield curve has higher numbers as you go out in duration or maturity, the number of years. Right now, we're in a current situation where the short end of the yield curve is higher than the long end of the yield curve. Typically, when that happens, the concern is that there may be a recession sometime down the horizon. There are some confusing signals with this right now, though, because the short term of the yield curve is controlled by the Fed, and the Fed's been raising rates until most recently where they lowered rates. And now they're telegraphing that they're going to continue to potentially lower rates should it be required. So the market has already priced in another 25 to 50 basis points, or 0.25 and 0.5% decrease from where we are today. The 10-year, which is kind of the cornerstone that everyone uses to measure how bond yields are trading, is trading at lows that we haven't seen since 2009, coming in at roughly 1.45-ish, sub 1.5. At the beginning of the year, that was about 1% higher. So there's been a dramatic movement in 10-year. Again, this number is going to jump up and down depending on how things work out with trade. The other piece that has been pushing down our yield is that relative to the other industrialized countries, though, we're actually yielding a nice strong yield. Roughly a quarter of government debt outstanding is negative yielding, meaning that you give money to the government and they're going to give you less money in 10 years. So compared to, for example, a German Bund, which is their bonds, their 10-year bond is yielding a negative 0.7%. We're yielding, positive, let's call it 1.5 for nice round numbers. So relative to German bonds, there is a differential of over 2% if you just buy US bonds. So that's why, obviously, if demand goes up, meaning prices go up, yields go down, that's another reason why yields have been somewhat modest. So the inversion of the yield curve presently potentially could be different from the past. You never want to say that this time it's different, but potentially this time it's different. So that was a little bit longer on the economic perspective to highlight for you that July was a good month. August was a down, so far August is a down month. As of the close of Monday, the portfolio was $487,246,630.
And you have that handout in your binders.
So let me stop there and see if there are any questions.
Hearing none? Everything else?
I don't know, when am I supposed?
Just hang on for a while, we'll find something.
Okay. I'll be here.
Okay. All right, we'll go into reports. We'll start off with committee reports. For the benefit of our new trustee, we do have two committees here. One being the finance committee, and you can kind of imagine what that entails. Anything dealing with the finances of our system. And the other being personnel and administrative committee.
Okay.
And we'll be getting with you soon to talk to you about that.
Okay.
We'll go into, which one you want to do first, Deborah?
We can start with the personnel committee. A lot of the items were covered by both.
Good morning,
Good morning,
trustee.
You
Go right
said you're
ahead.
gonna try to fit in something about Uncle Tommy, cousin Tommy, nephew Tommy. Bob, church letter. You just
Okay,
start-
put it on my bill. That's why I said there'll be trouble collecting, so anyway, go right ahead, Deborah.
Sure. The Personnel Committee reviewed a revised EDRO policy. That item is in your agenda. They are recommending that for approval this month. The Evaluation Committee and I will be meeting on September 19th to conduct my annual evaluation. Trustees are encouraged to send your comments regarding my performance to Trustee Swayzer prior to September 19th. Both committees, the Finance Committee last month had requested that we table the annual professional services provider review recommendation regarding the medical director. They had requested additional information regarding the fees. They did receive that information, and both committees are prepared to recommend that we appoint the new medical director. That is an item under unfinished business. Under new business, the disability retiree who is determined to be no longer disabled, we did receive his doctor's report, which conflicts with our doctor's report. The next step is for this board to receive and file his doctor's report, and those two doctors will appoint the third physician to form the medical board of review. That third doctor's medical report or his determination is due 60 days from his appointment. The disability retiree member who is reexamined in July was determined by our doctor to to continue to be totally and permanently disabled. There's an agenda item to receive and file that report and to continue his disability pension. Both committees did review the memo regarding adding Philip Moore as a Northern Trust authorized party and are recommending that for approval. Both committees are recommending approval of rescheduling the annual meeting to December 3rd. Both committees are recommending that we receive and file the supplemental actuarial analysis regarding the $400. Both committees did review the proposed 2020 budget. There were some format changes, and we'll review that under the executive director's report. But we do request that you send any questions or changes that you would like to see by September 12th, so that can go into the review for the committees next month. Both committees reviewed the correspondence regarding the service credit for the former hospital member, and both committees reviewed the monthly disability procedures report. The Finance Committee reviewed the addicts manager restructuring fee agreement and the investment guidelines. There are additional questions, so they are adding that to their September agenda. Both committees reviewed the Sizerd investment. You all remember that you had, as part of the addicts restructuring, we were going to graduate Sizerd. Both committees reviewed the investment vehicles. It was commingled fund versus a separately managed account, and they believe the best option for the system is to retain Sizerd under the manager programs. So that would be the new business item today. The Finance Committee received an update on the insurance review, and they are reviewing the funding policy, and that will be sent to the board for review in the next day or two. And that completes the report for the committees, Mr. Moore.
Thank you. Any questions of our executive director? Hearing none, any trustees have anything that you'd like to report to the board or communicate to the board in any way?
Mr. Chairman, if I might, last night at the council meeting, they did pass, so you should be receiving that information from the board. We did pass the $400.
Okay, thank you. I was, we give our thanks, of course, to the council for expeditiously receiving that and passing it, because I know that kind of came at the last minute. But once again, come to the aid, because it saves a lot of retirees perhaps being confused and angry because it didn't come in time. So thank you so very much. Anything else from any trustees? Hearing none, we'll move on to the chairman's report. I have nothing really to report right now, so we can move on to the executive director's report.
Okay, thank you. And if you don't mind, I'm going to skip item A and go through a few of the other things. In your handout, there is a copy of the status of the annual fee and contribution disclosure process. Every year, our service providers have to disclose the fees they earn related to the system's investment, as well as any political contributions they've made to local politicians. The status of that process is included.
Hold on, Jeff.
Mhm.
All right, go right ahead.
Sure. Also, there's a handout in your binder with an updated trustee contact list. I'd like to say congratulations to Mr. Mariani and thank all the candidates. It was a very competitive race and we were very pleased with the results of the turnout. There are no assets in transition currently. There are a couple of the SEC notices I thought would be of interest to the board, one with regard to Fitbit and one with regard to the Graco matter. Going back to the 2020 budget, Chairman Moore, I don't know if you'd just like me to quickly go through.
Yeah, I think it would be good to
Yeah.
kind of officially
Sure.
present it. This, of course, this budget is for the fiscal year of 2020. So, we're on a fiscal year of January 1 to December 30th. We generally receive it this month. If there's no questions, we can pass it in September. If there's additional questions, we still have time to then deal with anything that needs to be talked about in the budget. As long as we pass the budget by December 31st, then we should be in good shape. So this is actually the official presentation to the board. You have it, you got a chance to look at it. Any questions you might have, present those questions to the executive director, and hopefully we'll stay on track.
So I am just going to go very,
Mayor, as far as the agenda is concerned, we are on the executive director's report on the agenda.
Yes, thank you. But I do have our finance director who's here, and he is
Now, I just talked about,
able
I was just,
to
I was
catch
just,
me up and with you.
oh, you don't want to receive it from me?
Thank you.
Huh?
Sorry.
Mr. Moore, please.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
I said I was just trying to bring you up to speed on where we
Thank you.
were on the
Thank you
agenda,
very
so
much. I
you
appreciate
would know.
Yeah, I catch it pretty quick.
And I would hope that as we are around this table, that we look at each other as equals. We're all trustees, and there's no big eyes or little U's or them. We're all hopefully on the same side, which is to protect these funds for the benefit of the membership. With that, you can go ahead and continue.
okay. In your package, there is a memo, as well as the spreadsheet. What I would like to do first is just go through 2018 and talk about what happened in actual expenses versus what we budgeted for. In 2018, the adopted budget was $31.5 million. The audited financial statements reflect total expenses of $31.8 million, a difference of approximately 1%. The retiree payroll, which is 88.6% of total expenditures, varied from the budget by approximately 1%. Investment-related expenses, investment manager fees, custodial fees, and bank fees are 8.9% of total expenditures. They vary from the budget by less than 1%. Wages and fringe benefits, about 1.1% of actual expenditures. They vary from the budget. They were higher than the budgeted amount by 14.3%. There were some things that happened in 2018. The first was that we had, in addition to 3 full-time staff members, we had a temporary for part of the year that was not budgeted for. The leave liability increased. In 2017, we only had 3 full-time employees for 2 months of the year. The 2018 budget amount for medical was actually based on 2017. In 2017, there were only 2 full-time employees instead of 3. And also the 2017 medical expenses were understated because of an arrangement we had with the former executive assistant, which reduced her medical expenses by about $10,000. All other expenses is 1.4% of total expenditures, and they vary from the budget by about 1.7%. The computer expense was off by approximately $5,000. Though the new desktops and server were not budgeted. They were approved as part of the RFP for IT administrator. And then there was also the travel expense, which varied by a great deal from the budgeted amount. And again, that's just always tricky to estimate in any given year how much training and education will be provided. The next 3 columns are the 2019 budget, and it's just a comparison of what our actual expenditures through June are compared to where we would be based on the budget. The adopted budget for 2019 was $29.6 million. Actual expenditures through June 30 are $13.6 million, and that's below the expected amount of $14.8 million based on the budget. The actual retiree payroll will exceed the budget this year. We did not amend the 2019 budget to account for the $400 payment that gets paid through from September through December. So we will amend this year's budget, but it's at this point understated by quite a bit. At the February meeting, the Finance Committee also recommended that all future budgets that we go ahead and include that 4 months of the $400 as long as we believe it's likely to continue. And that period is included in the 2020 budget, so we won't need to amend the 2020 budget for that. Investment-related expenditures are significantly less than what you would expect. That's because Q2 invoices are not included in the through June 30th number. Wages and fringe benefits total are approximately 2.9% below the expected amount. We had budgeted for merit increases, and none have been awarded so far. But the fringe benefits for the new employee are also coming in at less than what the former employee had incurred. All other expenditures are about 27.8% below budget, and that's really just due to the timing of certain payments. The negative balances for software and computer equipment, we budgeted and incurred those expenses in 2018. This is just a reversal of the accrual. When we pay those amounts this year, it will have a 0 effect on this year's budget, but you do see negative amounts for those accounts. And then the last 3 columns are, include the proposed 2020 budget. The proposed budget is $31.9 million. This would represent a 1% increase over the 2019 budget after you account for the adjustment we're going to make for the retiree payroll. As I mentioned, this does include the $400 payment for the full year. Investment-related expenses are expected to approximate this year's amount. The wages and fringe benefits include cost of living increases of 3%. Fringe benefits are based on the 2019 amount plus 2% inflation. All other expenditures, we implemented the QuickBooks software this year. So when you look at the budget, if you go down the side, you see the account numbers. Some of the account numbers have changed, and there are some accounts, if you go to page 2, where we have new account numbers. I'm under other administrative expenses. 801, other professional services, used to include IT administration. That has its own separate line item now. So there were changes in the account structure for 2020. Does anyone have any questions about the budget?
Once again, this will be before the Finance Committee. Any questions that anybody might have between now and our next meeting, be sure to get those questions and concerns to our Executive Director, and I'm sure she'll be glad to answer them. Okay, you might continue on. You have anything else?
I do not, thank you.
Okay. So, that's the Executive Director's report. Unfinished business.
Okay, unfinished business, and if I might
You may.
add, we do have the Q2 performance books in front of us, and I didn't know if we wanted to go back and give David a chance to at least get an overview of the second quarter.
Is that what you'd like to do?
It's up to you all. I know that we have that also slated for the September manager review date as well, for a deeper dive. But if you'd like me to go through the book, I'm happy to do the book as well.
Is there anyone that would want that done now, and instead of waiting till the manager's review? And if it is, speak now.
Doesn't matter where we do it as long as we do it.
Yeah, it's gonna be done there anyway. So, why don't we move on?
Okay, unfinished business. Again, both committees are recommending that we would appoint Dr. Jeffrey Deach of MMRO as the Systems Medical Director, effective immediately, provided that the MES doctors shall be retained to advise on any outstanding cases as of July 30th. Obviously, we have a member who's going through the appeal process, and we would want to continue with the MES doctors who originally examined him. Does anyone have any questions?
I'll move. Support.
We have a proper motion before us. Is there any question, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We hear you, Mr. White. And the motion passes. Okay, we'll move on then to new business. And item number A, we've already taken care of. That's the certification of the election results. We'll then move on to item number B.
Okay, so you read the confidential report from the member's physician. This resolution would have you accept that medical director's reexamination report and determination that he is still disabled. And, I'm sorry, I think I have these backwards. This is to receive and file the member who was reexamined on July 8th. He was determined by our medical director to continue to still be disabled. And you would just receive and file this report and continue his disability allowance.
Motion's in order?
So move.
Moved and supported. Any questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, so ordered. Move right along.
This resolution would receive and file the member's physician's report, which conflicted with ours, and to have the two doctors appoint the third doctor to form the medical board of review and to continue the appeal process. Does anyone have support?
We have a proper motion. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, and so ordered.
Item D would update the signature authority at Northern Trust to add Philip Moore as an authorized party.
That's so move.
I'll support.
And supported. We have a proper motion. Any questions, comments, or concerns?
Back.
Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it, so ordered. Item number E.
Item E would reschedule the annual meeting to December 3rd, 2019.
So, got it.
Did we get those names?
No.
We're moving fast, moving fast. That was,
Sheldon,
Sheldon,
Patrice.
I think it was Albritton and
Swayze.
Swayze.
Oh, sorry.
Albritton and Swayze.
Thank you.
Any questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Ayes have it, so ordered. Item number F.
Item number F is the resolution to adopt the EJO policy and procedures resolution included in your agenda. Happy to take any questions.
Move. Support.
Any questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, so ordered. Number G, resolution to receive and file a supplemental actuarial analysis.
Move. Support.
We have a proper motion. Any questions, comments, concerns? I feel like an auctioneer.
Are you selling votes?
No, I think the last one did that, I think they're in jail now. I definitely don't want to go there. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, and so ordered. And now.
Chairman Moore?
Yes,
We have the resolution regarding Sizer.
okay, and that's the add-on, right?
That is the act, correct.
Okay,
And where is it at? In the book?
It's not in the book, it's a recommendation out of the finance committee meeting, and we did an agenda
Well-
change to add
why
that.
don't you go over that
Sure.
again so that everybody will have a clear understanding of what's actually occurring?
So Sizer is one of the Michigan-based managers that is under the manager of manager programs. In May, the board resolved to restructure that program, and part of that restructuring was that you would graduate the two Michigan-based managers, Sizer and North Point. The North Point transition has occurred. It was a paper transition. It's a separately managed account. They're continuing to manage the money, but we have a contract with them directly and not under the manager of manager programs. With Sizer, there were questions about the investment vehicle that they were offering. Sizer had offered to transition our investment into a commingled fund, so it wouldn't be a separately managed account anymore. We would sell off the assets, put the assets into a fund that they ran. The finance committee reviewed the commingled fund, they reviewed the parameters of a separately managed account, and it really mostly came down to the fees. And what the committee is recommending is that we would not graduate them, but we would just continue to allow them to remain under the manager of manager programs as they are now. Does anyone have any questions?
Okay, motion's in order?
I move.
Support.
And supported. We have a proper motion before us. Is there any further questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? These ayes are getting weaker and weaker. Ayes have it, so ordered. Excuse me, Mr. Okay, we'll go into the legal report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The attorney report for general matters, I assume is in the package.
Yes.
But Mr. Ballant, we haven't met everyone else. I'm Matt Hensey, I'm Cynthia's partner. Nice to meet you, Matt. Nice to see you. Thank you. So there are 6 items, and I think I'll go through this in record time.
And the general report is behind the litigation report. I apologize if that's in there backwards.
Good, go right ahead.
Okay, items 1 and 2, Sizer Capital Partners and Edro Policy, that you've already done the business. This is just to show you what our firm has done relative to these actions. Items 3 and 4 are 2 investment management contracts that are being reviewed. 5 is a Robin Skeller portfolio monitoring report for your information. 6 lists the fees from securities litigation matters, and I'll point out that there is no change from the last meeting. Now I'll ask for a motion. Let me find it, as I wrote one out. And this has to do with the fact that at the July 31 meeting, there was a closed session, there was a roll call, but there was no movement and second. So I'll read the motion, we're gonna reenact it. Under Michigan's Open Meetings Act, you can fix a mistake that you made by essentially making a do-over. So I'll read the motion, hopefully you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So it will read, resolved that the board shall reenact Resolution 19-093 pursuant to Michigan's Open Meetings Act, MCL 15.270, paragraph 5, in order to ensure that Resolution 19-093, made at the board's July 31, 2019 meeting, conforms to all requirements of the Open Meetings Act. Further resolved that the board approves to go into closed session to discuss a duty disability retiree request for appeal, Dell Inc., and Livent litigation matters.
That's the motion. Does anybody else want to make that motion?
Move.
It's been
Support.
moved and supported. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, all in favor?
We're gonna have a roll call vote.
Okay, roll call vote. Roll call, Mr. White. Would you call the roll?
Albritton,
Yes.
Ballot,
Yes.
Giddings,
Yes.
Mariani,
Yeah.
Moore,
Yes.
Swazer,
Yes.
D. Waterman,
Yes.
P. Waterman,
Yes.
White.
White, he got it. We got it. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Then I'll ask for a motion to go in a closed session to discuss the Venator Securities case.
So moved.
May I ask you a question here? Are there any other items that need to be discussed that we can discuss in the open session prior to going into closed session?
Do you want to do the legal resolutions now? Because we'll-
What I would suggest that we go ahead and get those things out that we can take care of in open session and then go into closed session. Is there any objections to that?
What's the legal resolution that we have to do?
That's what I'm asking.
The resolution you will need to, well, we amended the agenda to remove the closed session minutes for July 31st, so we don't have to do another resolution, is that correct?
No, I crossed it off. I
Okay.
consider it not
Amended.
happening.
Okay, thank you.
Are you just talking about legal items,
Just the
or are
legal
we talking
items.
about any, because?
We're only
we
talking about
discussed
the legal item.
Okay, because we want to do that after closed session to discuss the.
Yeah, we can do that. I just want to
Okay.
since we're on legal now, to just get that out the way, and then any additional things we can go ahead and
Okay.
cover in open session.
All right.
So are there any other legal items that need to be covered? So then a motion is in order to go into a closed session.
It was
It was already moved and
Okay,
supported.
all right.
Albritton,
Yes.
Ballant,
Yes.
Giddings,
Yes.
Mariani,
Yeah.
Moore,
Yes.
Swazer,
Yes.
Walker,
He's excused.
excuse, D. Waterman,
Yes.
P. Waterman,
Yes.
White.
Yes.
All right, so, as you see, this action plan is the extensive number of reports, 3 pages of very extensive documents the city had to supply and had to have her evaluate, analyze in accordance with our city charter, with the ordinances, with all the history since the beginning of the Gers board, because she must make sure all the i's are dotted and all the t's are crossed before she takes this settlement agreement to the IRS. It's extremely complex because of the fact that, as you know, as a board, and as we've talked about, the way we settled this Cypriot litigation was very novel and unique. It's the first time a municipality has used this particular way of settling retiree health litigation. And it's been done by some corporations, I believe, but this is the first time it's ever been done with municipalities. So we are setting records in terms of pension health care for retirees. So with that, they are kind of discovering new territory, and because of that, it's a very unique way they're going about it. So, all these things, all this paperwork has been done. or got it ready. The last two things were, number one, our attorney had to correspond with the SIPRI attorney, Mr. Giddens, SIPRI attorney. In April, he sent some questions to him. Mr. Giddens has responded
Not
as
Gibbs,
of.
you're-
Mr. Gibbs, I'm sorry, thank you, Mr. Gibbs.
No,
Bob Gibbs.
Not
Not you, not you, Bob Gibbs, okay.
I
Not-
tried to be
Good.
part
You're
of
not the
it.
opposing attorney, I thank you very much, okay? So, Mr. Gibbs, who has, did respond finally in the last 2 or 3 weeks. But the last thing remaining, that is the last thing she needs before we can go, and she can take this to council, so it can go to IRS, something that the people have been asking me to report on at council, and our retirees keep asking what's, when can we go to the IRS? The last thing is this actuarial assumption report that she has asked this board to approve, so we can get that going. And so I am here, I guess the request was originally submitted back in May sometime, and I'm here now in August, requesting, please, that you approve this request so we can get this actuarial report done as requested by the pension council from Miller Canfield, and that is the last document that you need in order to be able to get this application ready to the IRS. There's a lot of retirees out there waiting for this to happen. So I hope this board, by this meeting, I'm here to provide any questions that I can answer. And I do have the finance director who's also here, who is more knowledgeable probably about these things than I am. I would like him, at least if you could recognize him, to be able
Well,
to see if you have
can you
questions.
wrap it up there so that we
Mr. Moore,
can
you go ahead.
continue on? Let me give you a bit of correction on behalf of the board. We don't determine who is the finance director.
You don't. That's correct.
That's not within our area of responsibility. We only, as it relates to the clerk, we don't take our marching orders from the clerk. Really, the people that we're responsible to, first of all, are the people that we represent.
Right.
And then, of course, the city council is the one that really determines the ordinances and by large of how this system operates in conjunction with the board.
Right.
It's our understanding through the clerk that.
Well, there's your clerk.
Yes, you cut me
There's the
off.
clerk.
You
Okay.
cut me off.
Okay.
I gave you the respect, and
I hear
would
you.
expect the same from you.
I hear you. I will do
We
that.
understand through a resolution of the council from the clerk that the individual, Mr. Newsom, that you appointed as finance director was never confirmed officially by the council. Even with that, we have legal counsel that represents us as board.
Yes.
And so any action that we believe that might be disputed or it might be some controversy, we make sure that we go to our legal counsel and we get an opinion from our legal counsel, which we did do. And based upon the experiences that was happening around us, we did get our own legal opinion, which indicated until such time as the Pontiac City Council officially approves or disapproves this person. If a person is disapproved, they cannot serve as finance director, nor are they able to serve on this board as the finance director, because as you well know, that is by city charter that you, as the mayor, and the official finance director, they serve on there by virtue of their positions. And so that's really what happened. It's not that we did not want Mr. Newsom, because I don't know Mr. Newsom from the man in the moon, and I just assume that he's a respectable person. But until we get official action of the council that he has been just as us as trustees, we don't officially serve on here ourselves until we take the oath of office from the clerk.
Yes, you're not the city attorney.
Yeah.
You're not the council, you're not the mayor. I understand that.
Right, so I just want to make, want to make that perfectly clear. It's not something that we didn't honor or respect. It's just, the city council dictates a certain way
Right.
things are supposed to happen, and no matter what anybody else does, that is the ruling body. But right now, I think Billy has been wanting to speak. did you have
Oh, I
something?
wanted to say that Mr. Newsom is not the finance director, because I was at the council meeting when they turned down his appointment, and I was at the meeting when the council, she wanted to have an interim finance director after that, and the council removed that from the position and the pay.
Yeah. But let me just say,
So his position does not exist.
okay, but let me say this, you know, as I understand it, and, you know, that we want to be, first of all, we want to move this along if we're involved.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line, and this is not about personality. It's about business that we're dealing with.
Absolutely.
So I'll say this, you know, as mayor, you have the right, as long as it's in your budget and it's been approved by the city council with that budget, you have a right to employ professionals that you believe you need to carry
And I
out
do have an
the
interim
city's
finance
mission.
director, and I do follow the mandate of our city attorneys, who tell me that that is eligible under, in fact, we do have an interim city
But
clerk.
I'm
Interim
gonna
city
rule that,
clerk who has
I'm
all-
gonna rule that out of
So, I know
order
we aren't,
because,
you aren't the city attorney, so
All
you're not
we-
here.
As far
I
as
just
this
wanna make
board
sure.
is
Yeah,
concerned,
right.
Madam Mayor, you know, the charter mentions nothing about an interim, finance director. And as
Neither
far
does it
as
mention an interim
this.
city clerk.
well,
Mayor,
yeah.
I'm
I-
tired of
but-
this. Let's
okay.
move forward.
Neither does
We
it
have,
matter to the city clerk.
I'm tired of this.
Okay.
We know, and you keep going back and forth, debating whatever. This has been debated at the city council meeting. We know where we
Okay.
stand. Let's move forward. Either
I
we're gonna
understand
deal
that.
with this or we not. Because
Okay.
this is
I know,
getting
but
redundant.
I know it
This
is.
redundant.
It
Trying to
is
make
redundant.
statements, and I'm just.
It
Okay,
is
it's just
redundant,
redundant.
but once again, we all have an opinion, I respect everybody's opinion.
Somebody-
I'm just trying to keep
So
some
he's
of
here
the
because
decorum.
I need financial advice, and as we continue on
Okay.
with the discussion at hand,
As far,
I'm
this,
just trying to
this
explain the
board,
position,
this,
why I may refer to
this,
him
this
for
board
discussion.
has requested
Yeah.
certain information. We wanted to know about this request.
Okay, all right.
It's my understanding that everything that you've presented on here, this was asked for back in February of this year. And to my knowledge, we're gonna ask the executive director to speak on this, but everything that you've asked for,
I do not have anything
You
written
cut
to
me
me
off,
that was
Madam Mayor.
requested in February, so as you say this, I'm just.
no, that's
letting
what you
know.
said
I don't
yesterday.
have anything in February.
You
But-
sent a memorandum to this board yesterday that I forwarded to all of the trustees that indicated there was a date of February the 20th, I think,
2019.
that you requested information about this board and also police and fire board.
Where do
And-
you have that? Where do you see February?
Um,
February is a memorandum that came from
Right, the next page, the second page here,
Sandy
the
Kobach.
second page here. You see that page?
Okay.
It says, to Mayor Waterman, I'm not gonna read all that, but it says the date, it says request for documents, City of Pontiac Gers transition plan. And it's dated February the 20th, 2019.
It's the Gers transition plan. This was a document,
It's what?
it was a memorandum to me and the city attorney from Samantha Kopass.
Yeah,
Right?
but I mean,
That was to us, to me. And
Yeah.
it said we had to get all these documents, and that's what we've done.
and that's what was
Okay.
forwarded to us yesterday from you.
Well, because this was, you wanted an action plan, and so I presented the action plan. The request for the action plan didn't come until August 15th. August 15th from Deborah Munson. This is the email that I have in front of me right now.
Action plan,
Yes.
August 15th.
You
Where's
wanted a
that
written
at?
report
Mr. Mayor,
from me.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman,
I
the
have brought you
reason
the
why
report.
that was done is 3 months when we had it on our books. To deal with it, nobody came here to deal with it. So I personally asked the executive director to send the executive office a letter to tell us and let us know what the plan was. That's the reason why.
Yeah, because.
So what's the bottom line on this?
If we need
Because-
you, please, let's get to the bottom line. You wanted me to give you a written report of the action plan. I did submit that, the plan that was sent to me and the city attorney by the pension director in February. And, I am responding to your request that I personally bring a written report, but you did not accept my letter, to the Gers board. that I addressed. I requested this, and I have to look back at the date. I think this was back in June or July. So you did not accept my letter.
Who didn't accept your letter?
Well, you didn't, I asked you for the supplementary request for Gers supplemental actuarial analysis, written to Ms. Munson. And it's signed by me. As you're aware, the city has retained Miller Canfield Law Firm to assist in preparing documents, and I sent that request at that time. All right, and ever since then, we've gotten rejection from the Gers board to handle this matter. So I'm asking you to do that today.
Well, let me say this. No, you're wrong about that. Just
Well, I have the documents.
as Councilperson Waterman, Patrice Waterman indicated, for the last 3 months, we've requested that someone appear before us to give us an explanation of exactly what you do want and why you want it. And it wasn't until at our last meeting, we indicated we're just gonna take this off the agenda if nobody showed up.
Well,
So I'm not
I'm
even going to, you're out of order, Madam Mayor. Okay, right now, the executive director has been asked to speak. We'll allow you to go ahead and speak.
I have a question, but I want to be clear. What you sent us was in response to my email that the board would like an action plan.
Yes.
And what you provided, you're saying this is the action plan.
This is the only action plan that I have.
Okay, so
And-
let her finish.
And the only thing else that you need to make
Yes.
this filing
Yes.
is that final supplemental analysis.
Please, yes.
But the board has been putting this off because they wanted to ask questions about the assumptions you're using. So now that you're here, couldn't we have that conversation? Because if she's saying that's the last piece, we wanted to have the conversation about the assumptions.
Okay, well, there was nothing that said in any of these documents that have been going back and forth that you needed to know the assumptions. I'm just finding that out now.
No,
Okay?
the assumptions
Right.
are in
The
the
only thing-
request.
Huh?
No,
These-
there's
There was
nothing in
never any
this.
question that, you didn't question me about the assumptions, and asked me to supply an answer to that. The only thing you have said is that, number one, I sent the letter, you said, no, you're not gonna respect the letter. I sent the finance director, you're not gonna respect the finance director. So now that you said you want a written action plan, so I have a written action plan, all right? That's what you've asked me for, that's fine.
That's this?
This is the action plan.
Yes.
The February 20th letter from couple.
Okay.
Yeah, which is 3 pages of documents that was part of the action plan that we have been working on for 3
So
months.
that's documentation she was reviewing. It wasn't no action plan.
We had to supply them.
It was
Yeah.
a documentation she was reviewing.
Okay, let me ask this question here. This was, this action plan, as they call it,
Right,
request for information that was made on February 20th.
to the city, and we have been working on all those 3 pages of documents since then, we started. So the last one that she needed was from this, George's paper.
So as I understand what you're saying, you have all this information. It's already been provided
She
by
has
this.
already been studying it,
Can I,
compiling
may I
it.
finish, Madam
on
Mayor?
education, yes.
I mean, everyone has, we
Go ahead.
can talk
Go ahead.
together, but we can sing together, but we can't talk at the same time.
Okay, please.
So, what I'm saying is that the information that you've requested then,
That's
back
she-
on February, our office has provided that information.
No.
Is that correct?
No,
What have we not provided?
the thing that I'm asking you for today.
What have we not provided?
Okay, the letter that I wrote, to you, and I'll read.
Can
what
you
this
just
is.
tell me, what have we
Well,
not
I said
provided?
it, but let me just, for your edification. As you are aware, the city has retained Samantha A. Kapas of Miller Canfield Law Firm to assist in preparing documents related to the settlement of the litigation with the City of Pontiac Retired Employees Association. In that regard, Ms. Kapas is requesting a supplemental actuarial analysis with the following assumptions. 3.5% investment returns / funding assumption, utilize the 2010 Public Retirement Plan mortality tables pledged by the Society of Actuary. While the suggested assumption updates are not required by the Internal Revenue Code or other applicable law, Miller Canfield believes that the updates will aid the city and its retirees in evaluating the extent of the Gers overfunding. As part of the updated actuarial analysis, please determine whether the rates of separation from active membership are still accurate. If not, please provide information as to how the accurate rates of that separation impact the funding, and then your cooperation obtaining this study is greatly appreciated. Sincerely, Dr. Jupiter Waterman, Finance Manager. That's what
Okay.
was requested.
If that's what is requested, and this board has had some preliminary discussions as it relates to that document. And there were questions, of course, that the board has about that request. And, you know, as you well know by being a member of this board, we just approved, what month was it that we just approved an actuarial, a report. And that was just approved in what, 2 months ago?
The valuation was approved at the May meeting.
At the May meeting. So we just did, even since this request was being made, we have actually approved an actuarial, a report. Now, I guess, you know, it'll be open up to the board for us to discuss this, but one of the questions that we had was if we just did an actuarial, a report, an official report for this board, you know, first of all, the question becomes from the trustees, and we need to discuss this. That's something that only this board can do.
That's
No
what-
outside entity can request or approve an actuarial report.
That's what we're
So the
making
question is, I mean, amongst the trustees, why would we then give up? It's kind of like you as the mayor have to submit a budget to the city council, but me as a chairman of the retirement board will go to you and say, Mayor, you don't submit the report. Let me as a chairman submit the budget to the council. You would not allow me to do that. And I think that that's the way many
We're
of the.
not trying to do that. That's why I'm here asking you for the fourth time to do it.
So I think that we perhaps need to open this up to the trustees now to get your feelings on what we're talking about and how you feel about the request that's being made of us.
If I can speak, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, you may.
Bottom line is, why would we go from 7 to 3 1/4, 3 1/2? That, simple as that. There's nothing else. Why would this board go from 7 to 3.5?
Okay, that's a question. Is there, would you like to answer that, or would you like your consultant, or your, whatever you want to, I mean, anybody can answer that question. Why, and that's a legitimate question.
Well, for one thing, it answers the question you asked before about why would you do another actual report? Because the actual report you just did is not the one that was requested, okay? Now, the request is based upon the settlement. Now, a couple times you stopped me as I tried to give reports in previous months about what was going on with the Cypria litigation. You said, this isn't Cypria, okay?
It's not.
This is the Gers board.
It is.
So the things that Cypria concerning the lawsuit and the settlement and the way those discussions, those belong with the Cypria and the Cypria attorney.
Agreed.
They're not for part of the Gers board's discussion, all right? So I would like to apply that same, that all these things about which documents and what the percentages are all part of the discussion between the settlement bodies, not the Gers board, all right? So, just like you said, I wear different hats, you wear different hats too. You have to decide which hat you're wearing as part of the CIP, as a member of the CIPRI board, as you're wearing as part of the Gers board. And you have said repeatedly that the Gers board doesn't decide the CIPRI settlement items.
That's true.
Those are between the two bodies. So the question about how this particular percentage is something that was resolved between those two bodies and a part of the settlement, okay? So the only part that's pertinent to the business of the Gers board, and the retirees are waiting on, that I will, have been asked to report on by our councilwoman here for the next meeting, is to tell them whether or not the Gers board is going to do their part and approve the supplemental evaluation that is needed by the settlement attorneys, okay, who say that this is what is needed at the last piece for the IRS. Now, if that's a discussion you want to ask at the CIPRIA level, you know, why these percentages, and that's the appropriate place to do that, Okay.
Ooh, I'm wondering where, are we dealing with reality here, or what are we dealing with? Yes,
No, that's fake news and that's fake. I'd like to know, I'd like to see the secret agreement with the city of Pontiac that says the rate of return is 3.5%. And in the analysis that the secret agreed to that rate of return, because I've talked to Claudia Phillip, who is the president of CEPR, and the CEPR has never agreed to that. And I think
once again, may I reiterate, this is
So if
a
they-
Gers Board of,
Yeah.
this is the meeting of
So
the
the Gers Board has to
trustees
decide whether they wanna
of
do it or
Gers.
not.
What-
This has
but-
nothing to do
there's a-
with the CEPR settlement, okay? That's around a different table.
Okay,
And
but
if
all
we
I'm
can
saying
just-
is that the mayor's saying,
Yeah,
the Gers agreed to that 3.5%,
Yeah.
then
but I'm
that-
not even dealing with that part of it.
Okay.
Okay,
Well, I'ma just
because
say-
that is not the business of this
Okay,
board.
and I'ma just tell you that, then my feeling is, this board sets the rate of return,
Yes.
7%. We just went down from 7.5% to 7%. I just came from a, conference in May, and what they said was, if your professionals, if your actuaries and your auditors have a problem with your rate of return, they will tell you. Our actuary had no problem with our rate of return. Our auditors had no problem with our rate of return.
Okay. The rate of
And they are the professionals that this board handles.
Yeah.
And they are cognizant of our financial situation. And
Yeah, so as one, and you're mixing up things, the rate of return has nothing to do with what they're asking in this kind of report. The rate of return is what the rate of return is, and that is part of their filing. What they wanna do for the actuarial, and they may be asked by the IRS to produce a range of returns. What if? So the 3.5% is actually, and I'd like my finance director to step in on this, the 3.5 is a more conservative estimate, you know. So and I'm not doing the filing, I'm not a pension attorney, so, you know, you're asking me a question, but maybe that question should be asked at a CIPRIA meeting to the CIPRIA rather than something that is, you're trying to decide here, because you haven't been part of that whole discussion, nor is it appropriate for you who are trying to protect the funds of the retirees who are waiting for this to be settled, that are waiting for them to be able to do this approval, so.
Let
I don't
me
know. The board
reiterate.
has to decide whether or not.
Let me reiterate
But I've done what
once
I can do
again,
and for the retirees.
this board has nothing to do with the settlement. It has nothing to do with the lawsuit.
That's right.
That is between CIPRIA, that's what I call it, and the city of Pontiac. Now, once that is resolved between those two parties,
All right.
and we get direction from the Pontiac City Council, who is the only one that can settle a lawsuit for our city,
That's right.
then we're obligated to act. But until that time, I want, that conversation should not even be
The
discussed.
council has already accepted the settlement.
Madam
They-
Mayor,
they're
if
just trying to
you
give
want,
this to
if
the
you want
IRS.
respect, you gotta give it,
Okay.
okay?
All
You
right.
can't just continue to cut me off and expect me to continue to be civil with you.
Keep going, keep going.
Okay?
Keep going.
So that lawsuit is y'all's business.
That's right.
Okay, once you resolve that,
All right.
the question that this board has to deal with is, do we allow any outside entity to come in and set the assumptions for our board? That's the question. Now,
It's doing the.
me for one,
Yeah, it's not
I don't
setting the
believe
assumptions
Mr.
for your
Clark-
board. It is not setting the assumption for your boards, and that's what you're trying to mislead people. It is filing an IRS application, has nothing to do with setting the assumptions.
That's your
So don't try to
business.
mislead people, don't try to mislead people. But you've done 90% of the talking, let's hear the board talk.
okay.
Let's hear the board talk.
Yeah, go right
Question,
ahead.
maybe Matt could help. As I understand it, the state law, what that addresses is the fact that retirement funds can't pay for any studies to change benefits or do anything and all that. It has to come from the plant sponsor or anybody that wants to pay for it, but not the retirement funds. So we adopted a policy that requests have to come to the board, and then we forward it to the actuary, and we collect a payment based on the actuary's estimate for it. So it'd be, my thought is, I mean, if somebody's coming to us and they want to do a study, what do we care what the study is? If they want to do a 1% factor, they want to do a 20% factor. We've had other people come, Larry Marshall has come, we've had Nevers, I think, the city did thing about reinstating pensions. I mean, it has no impact on what we do here as the board, whatever they want to run.
Okay, that's your opinion. Okay, I
I
respect
mean,
that
yeah, I
opinion.
mean, am I off base?
Well, I don't, you know, right now, rather than to get the attorney involved in it, why don't we hear what other
Okay, yeah,
trustees
just,
have to
you know.
say?
Thought he was sitting here
I
for a reason.
respect that.
Can I put a motion on the floor?
Your emotion is
That's what
all,
she speaks. I would like to I would like to put a motion. I think we need to
well,
put this to some.
before we entertain a motion, there has been a request to hear from other trustees.
Sure.
I
I would
think
like
that,
to know,
that's what
have
we need
we,
to do.
you know, we questioned several people, several professionals, and asked them, does anyone else use 3.5%? And they said, no.
We're not
No,
using
You know what, I asked you want me to respect you? So respect me when I'm talking. Be quiet.
You do the same thing
Hey,
at the council
okay.
meetings. You do the
It's
same
not-
thing
look,
at council meetings.
When
Thank
we're
you.
at the council meeting, you talk at the council
You do
meeting.
the same thing
Hey,
at council
we're trying to
meetings.
get, we're trying to move forward on
Okay,
this and
anyway,
this back and forth.
There's no other entity, the professionals that we question, no other entity uses a 3.5%. And I would ask that, we ask Deborah Munson, as any other entity, on all these actuary studies, have we used any rates similar to the 3.5% or anything other than the actuary rates that we always use?
I think we've already had that answered. I think the actuary has indicated they don't know of anyone that's using a 3.5%. But let me respond. Is there anybody else that want to
This is
speak
comical.
to this? It is. Yes, go right
I was
ahead.
gonna say that, you know, I don't have a problem with a 3.5% rate of return on an actuarial study, but I guess where I look at it is, what's the basis for the 3.5%? Where did that come from, and nobody's answered that yet?
Yeah, I
But
just did.
is it a 5%?
I
mean,
just did. She is probably required to do a range, probably IRS.
But
7% is what we're,
that's-
she has a 7%, because you have an actual study that's 7%.
Right, but what
So
we've
she-
asked for is, we've asked for what's the basis of the 3.5%, and nobody's answered that question, so
It's
if
a
she can
range,
answer
it's a
that question,
range,
but
it's a
she
range.
hasn't said that, that's.
I'm telling you that, it's a range.
Okay, first of all.
Because she has 7%, because she already has that, because we have the actual study, but she doesn't have it for a more conservative number.
Let me say this too. It's not necessary for us to give up our authority that only we have. And the difference between us, what's being asked of us, and what Larry Marshall might have done, not only Larry Marshall, but anybody that have approached this board for an actuarial study, it's been based upon a specific request based upon the individuals that, when Larry came, he asked for an actuarial study on specifically those individuals that were getting an early retirement. That's entirely different than someone coming in requesting us to give up our authority to change our numbers. That's what they've done.
We're the only
Reset.
ones that can change the number.
Pardon me?
We're the only one that can change the number.
I understand that. So why would we give that up?
We're not giving that up.
I just,
Well, I'm not gonna
I would like to
take
make a
that to you.
motion, Mr. Chair, if I can be recognized.
Yes, well, let me
I would like to make a motion.
let me complete my statement.
Okay, well, you can take the next one.
You can make my motion. Yeah. So what is being requested of us, and what I'm not willing as one person to give up, and I like you would wanna know, first of all, why are we asking the 3.5%? And you know as well as I do, we changed our assumptions based upon wanting to be conservative. We changed it from 7.5% to 7%, because if you look at the great majority of the pension systems in this country,
Oh, boy.
they use 8%, 8.5%. There's some that are conservative as we do that use a 6%, but there's absolutely nobody that uses a 3.5%. But the question becomes, we're not gonna, why should we give that authority up? That's the real question. Why, we can only do it. We just did one. Why can't that be used? And
Because she has that.
you're speculating.
They're not using
You're
it for
speculating.
managing a pension, they're using it for an application to the IRS for God knows what reason. We're not the experts on that at all.
Well, that's what my concern is that we did not allow, that's my concern, right?
Okay.
But anyway, if you wanna
Okay,
make a motion.
Yeah, I
for-
have some other issues. My finance director.
Did you wanna
Sorry.
make a motion or what?
The purposes of the annuity and insurance of 3.5% is routinely used. So anyway, just to supply that as you're wandering around, this has nothing to do with it. But my motion is that I move that.
Before we entertain that motion,
Can I finish my motion?
no, now, before we entertain that motion, I just wanna finish my thought.
Okay.
You can do an actuary study yourself. You don't need this board to give you an authority. All you have to do is take our numbers and apply whatever assumptions that you want to apply.
The IRS won't accept that.
Well,
They need it from that's why this is a.
But let me ask you this question then.
IRS.
Let me ask you this question. Has this been submitted to the IRS?
No, because the application has to
So,
complete all these things.
so what makes you think that the IRS needs this?
I've hired a pension attorney who specializes in IRS applications. I'm not a pension attorney, you are not. But we have had here who is talking about all these
But
documents.
he is,
all
and
this
our
research.
attorney is too. She's one of the best in the business.
Well, that's not the one Cypria and we're using by the settlement, okay?
Okay, go
So,
right ahead, make your
That's
motion.
the one we're using by the settlement. All right, I would move that the board approve the issuance of a commitment from our actuarial to prepare the study and report as requested by the Miller Canfield attorney who has been retained to prepare the documents on behalf of the settlement agreement that's approved by the city council in preparation for the IRS application, so the retirees can be restored their health care. And that is my motion.
Okay, could you give us that motion again? Did you get the motion?
Not all of it, no.
It's on tape too,
It's-
so we'll go to the
Yes.
recording.
It's on tape, I got the whole thing.
Okay.
This
There's a
mo-
second.
This, what is the,
You need a second?
I need the motion.
It's on tape, and I read it already, so.
We're not dealing with what's on tape, Madam Mayor, we're dealing with what motion did you just make? Because it was so long of a motion, I'm not sure what it was.
And I'm not sure I can read it verbatim, but essentially it's just a motion, and the actual words will be on tape, and if she didn't get it on hand. But in essence of it is that I'm just asking the board to approve this request to get an actual study as requested by our, the Miller Canfield pension expert, who's preparing the application for the Cypria settlement to be, go to the approval for the IRS. That's what I'm requesting.
That is not
As
a
a motion.
complete motion. You said this request, I think whatever you're requesting should be in the
I'm requesting the
motion.
board approve a, what am I missing?
A supplemental
You're missing
actuarial
everything.
analysis.
Huh?
You're requesting that the board would approve
Yes.
to send to the
Say it
actuary
for me.
the request for a supplemental actuarial analysis
Yes.
based on the parameters in the email, the 3.5%, the $400 continuing
Yes.
till next year,
Yes.
and continue forever. Based on those parameters, that we would request the supplemental actuarial
As
analysis.
requested by the Miller Canfield pension attorney, who has been retained by the settlement agreement participants as approved by the city council in order for the application to be filed with the IRS so that the retiree health retirees can have their retiree health care restored. Okay. That's what I'm requesting, that this board vote on.
Was that
Is there-
was like three motions there. Let me just say this, until we get a clear
Is there
understanding.
a second on the motion?
No, before we get a clear understanding of why they came up with the 3.5%,
Yeah.
you know, I think we need to squash this. Because I'm not gonna vote on anything that I don't have a clear understanding why they came up with those numbers.
Okay,
And wait a minute, I'm talking, give me a minute. Just like Bob stated earlier, if you guys, you have the authority to go ahead and do your own study. You don't need to come to us for that.
no, the application.
Okay,
The rest will accept
so,
it.
but until we get a clear understanding, and you keep saying the IRS, till we get a clear understanding, why they asking for that?
They
My
haven't
vote
asked-
is
They
no.
haven't asked for that.
So we can't, until we get a clear understanding how you come up with the 3.5%, you keep stating that the IRS have requested that.
Mm-mm.
Until we get a clear understanding and understand fully what you're asking of this board, and then you keep saying about their attorney, like our attorney has no stake in this matter. When we have issues, we go to our attorney. Your attorney do not supersede our legal counsel. So until we get a clear understanding, my vote is an absolute no. And you put that, when we do a roll call, no.
Well, parliamentary procedure says that I made a motion.
We don't have a second on the motion. There's no second on the motion.
Do I have
You
a second
haven't
on
asked
the
for
motion?
one.
Hmm?
You haven't called?
I don't have to ask for it. I just said, I will ask for it, but, you know, we're trying to get what the real motion is at this point. Yeah, because even from the one you put on the table, she's added on to that.
Are you seconding it? I don't know with your hand, but you raise your hand. Are you
Well,
seconding it?
no, I'm just scratching my
Oh, you're
head.
not seconding it? Okay.
I'll second it if you want.
Okay. If you want to
Okay,
second
so
it,
we
then-
have a motion before us. Once again, would you read the motion so that everybody understands the motion?
Are you gonna read that motion?
I'm gonna ask Deborah to do that, and I'm gonna request a roll call vote.
Sure. So the motion is that the board would approve to submit to the actuary the request for a supplemental actuarial analysis based on parameters in the request.
Put that in there. That don't be based on the parameters of the request.
That's, I'm sorry, that was my just kind of
She added it
editorializing.
on. I'm requesting that, here.
Say what this, what
Earlier
it
you
is.
said you wrote, but I
She's
think
trying
it
to
should be
paraphrase
parameters
it.
set forth in the August 7, 2019 letter. That's the one I saw.
August
I
7.
didn't see that one in your email.
Wi-
It was
Well,
in the
the
packet.
original request was in May, and it was in an email, so that's fine, I can say the letter.
Because then you
Yes,
can
thank
just
Absolutely.
refer back and insert the
Okay.
language.
Yeah, please, the language was in the letter.
Okay.
We do have a motion. You seconded that, Bob? Okay. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Yeah, I have a question.
Mhm.
And this might be out of order, but if this doesn't go through, you don't get approval, Mayor, what's your next step? Are you
Then
gonna
I
hold
tell the
hold
people, tell the council we don't have approval, and the Gers board refuses to follow.
So that's the
through on-
bottom line.
So that's the
Right
only
here.
thing that we're
Do-
waiting
do-
for, and that's why we haven't gone to the IRS.
Because as I understand, or
No,
from
that's not
reading
the
the federal court order last November directed the parties to file with the IRS.
That's correct, that's exactly correct.
But let me
The
clarify.
council did vote to approve,
We
so that we need
did
to
a
do
vote to
that.
approve.
But it wasn't
But my
anything about
thing,
this
we
here.
did not vote to approve,
And
3.5% up to 7. Just as, Mr. Albrecht, I need clear understanding, if it's gonna be 3.5, or is it gonna come back with 5.5 or 7? Put everything in front of us, so we understand exactly what we're voting for. That's just the way I feel about it, because yes, I do want our retirees to have their insurance, but I'm not going to sit here and don't have something in front of me that states why you say 3.5, and then Iris said, maybe no, not that, let's do 5.5, maybe not that, let's do 7%.
Let me point this. let me
That's
point-
all, I just need clear
Okay,
understanding.
let me point this fact out, so because I think that, you know, there's been erroneous statements made as it relates to this request. And this request was made by you.
Yes.
It says in the request, while the suggested assumption updates are not required by the IRS, or the Internal Revenue Code or any applicable law. So this is not a request from the IRS. This is a request from, I guess, Miller Canfield. And so I just want to make sure that that's understood. So I don't want anybody to be confused, and I don't want anybody to think or try to blame this board on retirees, or that settlement not occurring, because we're not a party of it. We don't have a vote on it.
Okay.
But what we do have authority is if we want to allow any outside entity to change our assumptions. That's my issue.
Well, okay.
And so, yes, go ahead, go right
Oh,
ahead.
So, and I'm not sure how this would work, but and I think as we talked before, clarification on the 3.5% is where I think that we all need to see.
Yeah.
Where did the assumption come, where did the 3.5 come from? Is it a basis for providing a range of what the rate of return is for this fund? Or is it a current rate of return or current assumption, and then, hey, this is worst case scenario, let's say in 20 years? I don't know, but I think it would help all of us if we got something from Samantha Kopaz at Miller Campus saying, this is where we came up with it.
Right.
And this is why we need this. Because I don't see it anywhere. I mean, I've read through this and everything else, and I see nothing that says where that even came from. Now, if this helps the situation, which it will, the city will be able to do the IRS filing and be done with this. This will be all behind us once this is done. But we need the information to say why and how they came up with 3.5%.
Okay.
I think that's the really simple answer, right?
Okay, I think that that's a legitimate question, and it would seem to me that if Samantha is the person that can address that, I'm just wondering why she's not here to be able to address those kind of
Or even just a
concerns.
memo from her saying, this is how we came up with 3.5%. It's really as simple as that.
That's a legitimate.
Mr. Chair. Oh,
Yes.
sorry, I wanted to give a technical response to that last point. There's a difference between capturing a snapshot of the excess overfunding on the date that the system closes and system number 2 begins. That is different than projecting what system number 2 is gonna look like in 20 years.
Okay.
And so, I don't know what the basis for the 3.5%, but I wanted to make that point because the way that the letter reads, it indicates that it will be helpful to determine the excess overfunding. So that means that the intent is to use a 3.5% assumed rate of return so that on a specific day, you can determine what the overfunding is that day.
Okay.
That's the request.
Yes, sir.
Okay, is there any other questions, comments, or concerns?
And once again, just to reiterate, because there's a lot of them, this does not set any rate of return for this board. As you have said, the board sets it. The board sets it. This is just, and thank you, Mr. Hensey, for chiming in about what may be the reason for this particular study. They have all the other studies and presented to the board is set. This is something that finance director says it may be related to the insurance sector. But I call for the vote. I think we've talked about it long enough.
So this is basically for informational purposes only moving
Yes,
forward with.
yes.
I can't say that.
Well, okay, so that's what we need. That's exactly the piece of information we need from Miller Canfield saying, we're asking for this for informational purposes only. This is why. I think
Well, I have 2 points.
that's what we've been talking
I
about
have 2 points.
for a long time now.
If the city wants it for informational purposes, they could hire Rodwin
Mhm.
or Larry Langer or anybody else to
Or
do it.
any other qualified?
But they're asking
Actuary.
for your actuary to use numbers that
Yes.
they select.
Mhm.
And that there have been comments about folks having heartburn with that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so.
I being one.
Right, so they could just go hire Sandy Rodwin and say, run another number. But I have to tell you, I wouldn't be doing my job if I said I've got a fundamental problem with using 3.5%. So I'm looking at it since inception, so since 1995, your consultant told you that you've had an 8.2% return.
Now, since we've had over a 10-year period of time, we've had a total return of
Yeah.
10.6.
So what I would debate with Samantha Kopaz,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I'm the only one that can be right and she's wrong.
Okay.
But what I would debate her about is that if you're going to tell the IRS that you're using a 3.5% assumption, that seems to contradict the fact that every single actuarial valuation report has used 7 or 7.5.
Okay.
In the country.
Yeah, this
Not
originally
just-
came to
This
you
is
in
the kind of
May,
analysis-
So, May, and that we've been waiting 3 months, so now.
No, you
it's
have
okay.
not been waiting.
Yeah, we have, because this came to you.
You haven't
This
been
came
here
to
in
you.
3 months. You
Doesn't
are
matter,
a
the request came,
representative.
so if you had a question about it, that should have come, by now. Why are you waiting until August, and this came to you in May?
Mayor, you
to
are
ask us questions?
an
But
official
there's a vote.
distorter
There's a
of the
vote.
facts. And while you're doing that, you know, this is not games that we're playing.
I'm not playing any
You
games.
sitting up here, we bringing this up in this meeting, just like you do in a city council
I
meeting.
have the letter.
You know, you're
Ms.
playing
Munson said
kids'
she
games.
received it.
There's
We
a
have a
motion,
vote on the
there's
floor.
there's a motion on the board,
I asked for a
on the
roll call
motion.
vote.
Can I
Yeah,
make one more
go
comment?
right ahead. You know, this is time
I
out
have a
for
roll
these
call
circles
vote,
that
please.
they follow you wherever you go. Yes.
The last sentence I was gonna say is that using a range is typically an exercise before it has been decided whether to act. So if you were kicking around the idea of, are we going to do this? Then I could see somebody saying, let's have a range. But you're past that. There's a settlement agreement that says it is gonna happen. And so what the sponsoring entity has to tell the IRS is, as of a snapshot in time, using these numbers, this is the excess overfunding. And mindful of the fact, as the parties are, that could change if you send in your application in October and you get your response the following November.
And let me say this too. In this arena that in my experience in this arena, sometimes you have to listen to your attorneys, and sometimes you have to tell your attorneys what to do. And it seems like to me that there's too many people, especially around this table, that instead of making professionals understand that they work for you, you're working for them.
Okay.
And so, you know, I'm not buying because Miller Canfield or any other professional that come in here and tell me
Do we
or
need
us
to
what to
lecture?
do,
Can
that
we
we're
call for
gonna
the
do
vote?
it, yeah.
Can we call for the vote?
Well, you know, you've been lecturing all day.
I'm sorry,
No.
Mr. Chair, but
Does everybody understand what we're voting on?
Yes.
A roll call vote has been asked for. So would you call a roll?
Albritton,
No.
Balin,
No.
Giddings,
Yes.
Mariani,
No.
Moore,
No.
Swazer,
No.
D.
White.
Waterman,
P. Waterman just left, so she didn't have to vote?
I'm
She
taking
called
her
you.
vote, no.
Where's
She
she vote?
called, no, she called you. She
Where-
called
I
me.
said D. Waterman.
Let's not interrupt the roll call, okay?
She was here, she
Not-
here for the vote?
D.
That doesn't make
Waterman.
any difference. You're not in.
D. Waterman,
You
Oh,
vote.
wait a minute.
You
I
only
thought-
got,
I
you only
missed
got
her.
one vote.
Okay, so this is for me, I vote yes.
P. Waterman,
She's not here,
What about Mr. White?
she just left.
White,
No.
Okay.
Okay, is there anything else that needs to come before the board?
If there are any questions that you have, and I will take this back to council and the retirees. So I hope at some point we can get this going.
Well, you
because
already
I
got
said-
it going. You can take the,
May I finish my-
go right ahead.
Let me finish my statement. All right. I'll take this back, but, you know, I'm gonna do my best so we can keep this moving along, because, you know, it has been such a long time, and there's a lot of retirees who are waiting, as you all said at the council meeting, who are very much challenged by the fact that they don't have their retiree health care. So I'm doing my best to move this along. I pledged that we would continue the $400 payment, and I've done that every year, renew it. But for some people, that doesn't never pay their expenses for their health care. And I think for this board to be the one last holdup for that is a problem for people. And I think, I wanna do whatever we can to get this resolved.
Yeah.
So if you would send me the questions in writing that you have, now, that, since May, that we hadn't gotten since May, if you would send them to me, I will do my best to get them answered, and we'll bring this back, and hopefully we can get this moved along.
You know,
There's nothing we can do about moving this settlement to the IRS until we get this, evaluation. So I thank you for that.
You know, yeah, go right ahead.
I think, I mean, as a board if we can find out today, okay, what are the questions we need answered to get this moving forward?
Okay.
And send them this back right now, a final, here, this is what we need and we can move this forward. Do we need something in writing from Samantha Kopaz, from Miller Canfield, or do
You
we need her
probably
to
need her
physically come
present.
here
We
and
need
say,
her present.
this is where this came from, this is why we need it, this is, and again, and maybe even have our actuary here to ask questions on our behalf, and just get it done.
Yeah.
I think that would be the prudent way to move forward, because obviously I agree that it's been going on long enough, and I think we've been going back and forth, maybe not communicating in the best way. So if we have everybody here in the room all at one time, we can get the questions out, hash it out, and be done with it.
Well, let me.
I just want to say,
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, and also you, John, we had put our request to have Samantha here some time ago.
Three months ago.
When we had our actuary here to address those issues.
Right.
So this board meets monthly. It's on the calendar. So I don't ever want it to seem that we are not here working for the retirees and making sure that all they care about is that their check cleared each month, okay? And we've been here every month. We had our actuary here also. She actually used that particular board right
I
there.
believe that was my first meeting, so I'm a little behind in the.
And she did a comparison
Mhm.
with the 7% and the 3.5%, okay? So we meet monthly. We will, Lord's willing, we'll meet next month. All right? And these issues have been out there several months ago. Until we get a clear understanding, like we all have stated about the 3.5%, it's kind of hard for us to vote on something that we don't know what the hell we're voting on.
Is somebody gonna take
And let-
responsibility for getting the
and
questions?
let
to
me
me
say,
that we have, and I'll-
can you be recognized, B, before you just speak?
Some other people haven't been recognized, so.
Well, this goes to anybody across the board. Let me just say this too. Once again, let me clarify our responsibility. It is our responsibility to set the assumption for this board.
Maybe do that.
We have done that. We've done that every year for as long as I've been here, and it's been for at least 15 years. I would think any reasonable body, whether it be the IRS or whoever else might request information, that they request the official document of this board. Now, if you submit that, or whoever submits that document, that is our best estimate of the future of this system. Now, once that is submitted, if the IRS then says we need additional information to then to prove our request, to prove our area of responsibility, then that's a different situation. But for us to allow someone to manipulate the numbers, as indicated already, that's not even requested by the IRS, I believe that we're giving up our fiduciary responsibility.
Thank
Now,
you,
we're gonna let you
Mr.
have the
Pension.
last word, maybe if you don't throw any
Thank you,
bricks.
Mr. Pension Attorney, for your review of what should be done. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
If I knew you were such an expert, I wouldn't have to pay, $30,000 for them to do this.
We probably wouldn't have to do, we probably wouldn't do this if you're
But
gonna
I
go
thought you-
there,
I
if
thought
we
you-
had
I
a
thought you
different
were gonna
mayor
give me the last
either.
word. I thought you were gonna
We
give me the
probably
last
wouldn't
word.
do that if you wanna
I
go
thought you were
there.
gonna give me the last word.
No, I won't promise that.
Guys, I got
Yeah.
to go.
Okay, I can't promise.
But before you go,
I
let's
can't-
set the meeting for the,
Okay.
date for
Let
the
me
next
know,
meeting.
please, let me know, maybe the executive director, the questions that you want answered. I can't promise, I don't know her schedule, that she can be here, our next meeting. I can't promise that, I can't say that. So, I want, give me the questions and I'll do my best to get them answered between now and then then you'll take it to a review.
You've heard the questions. You've heard the questions that have been
No,
raised.
I want to make sure
And-
that
and-
I get
and-
them
and I-
right. I get them
Get the
right.
video.
What I'm gonna say here
You got
is
the
that
video.
we don't want,
Give her a
thi-
copy of the video.
we do not want this to be thrown back at us to where we're asking questions of some source that has never appeared before us. So as far as, I would think that if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, then any questions that might have that come out of this, if you are sincere in wanting to move this forward,
I do.
then you should already have the questions.
That's why I sent them to you in May. So, please send me the questions, and I'll send an email to you, just asking that, we have the questions, so I make sure that it's represented and everything is answered, so we don't come back next month saying, well, what about this question, okay? So I'll send that to,
The only question that was asked that I'm aware of is the 3.5, Mr. Ballin asked, why are we using
I
the
just wanted to
3.5%?
confirm that. What is the basis of the 3.5%?
I'm gonna send you an email, just send it to me in writing and I'll forward that directly.
No, I'm trying
No.
to make sure from the
Nothing
board
is lost.
before
So
we.
the purpose and the basis of the
The purpose
3.5%,
and the
I
basis.
believe. And so how are they using that, I think is the key.
And why do you think it is required?
Right.
Yeah. And why can't we use the actuarial report that we just approved?
So this is August, hopefully we get it in September.
Or why we can't use the numbers that we've established for the last at least 10 years? All of those are questions that need to be asked. But with that, is there anything else that needs to come before the board? Then we need to,
Let's set a date for next
for the
month.
next meeting. And the date of the next meeting is, what date is that?
September 25.
September the 25th. Is there any objections? Yes.
Question,
Mhm.
I asked Deborah in between meetings, but do we have a finance committee meeting set? I don't think we discussed that yesterday.
We will have one set, we'll let you know.
Okay.
Mhm. Anything else?
That date is not gonna interfere with neighbors at all.
The 25th is after,
Okay.
well, I mean.
Yeah, no, it won't.
In the
interfere.
past, we had it
Makers is
Tuesday
open at
afternoon
Tuesday.
after.
Okay,
Yes, before 12 noon,
okay, just check.
and it's only 3 hours away, so we'll be back.
Okay.
All right, so the meeting is adjourned then.
You need a motion to.
I make a motion that we adjourn this meeting.
Until September 24th?
25th.
25th.
So
Okay.
Mr. White wasn't present for the vote too? I'm sorry.
Yeah, he
Yes,
voted.
he did. He voted no.
He voted no?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Okay, we're adjourned then?
All in favor? All in favor?
Aye.